Welcome to the Glenn Beck program. Last night, my wife and I sat on our couch in our living room and I watched the show with her. And she saw the, the Black Panther that, said want to kill crackers and cracker babies. She gasped. She had seen it before. But it's such a visceral soundbite. It is so amazing to see that. I'm going to ban that selectively on this program, and I'll explain why tonight. And it really, maybe it doesn't need much more explanation than this. This is what I told you 6 months ago. I told you that when their backs are up against the wall and the president and progressives were out of options, they would have one play left. This is what I told you 6 months ago. Whether it passes or not is going to be irrelevant, quite frankly, to these people. It is exactly what they need. What's in the bill, it doesn't matter. The issue will be racism. The progressives must reactivate their far-left base. They must smear their detractors. They will call me and Fox News and anyone else. If you believe that we are a nation of laws and not of men, you're going to be called nasty names. And they're not going to listen to any of the facts that you have to say. Okay, so since I knew that back in January, we're not going to fall into their trap, but we do have to have a reasonable conversation. And if we can't have that reasonable conversation, well, then to hell with the republic. But I'm going down swinging, but we're doing it intelligently. I'm done playing that tape because I'm not going to give them what they want. But it is critical that you understand how people like the Black Panthers are not just an isolated group, and how they arrived at the conclusion that it's reasonable to kill white babies. It's called liberation theology, and when you couple it with progressivism, it can be deadly. Tonight, we are not going on a passionate quest. We're going to go on an intellectual and spiritual quest, if that's still allowed in America. This cannot be visceral. We can't lump everyone together. If that's what you like to do, you should turn the show off. If you are willing to listen and listen in context and try to figure out what the heck is happening in our country, then join me. Tonight we're going to tell the mostly unknown, and most people avoid this part of it, the story of America. Come on. You know what? I have faith in America. I have faith in Americans. I have never treated you as an audience member as a moron. I haven't. I think you're intelligent, and the day I start treating you like a moron or stop telling you what I really believe because it's too politically costly, I think we are going to be losing our republic. We just have to be measured and reasonable when we say it. I've taken a lot of hits from people like Reverend Jim Wallace on social justice. I spoke my mind on social justice because I needed you to know that there was a poison in many of our churches. This poison, I explained, is social justice the way Jim Wallace or Jeremiah Wright understands it. It isn't in the gospel. Redistribution of wealth is not in the gospel. Jesus never said, take from the rich. He never said, take from the rich and give it to the government and then have the government distribute it. He didn't. In the story of the Good Samaritan, how did that happen? What was that parable all about? Were you supposed to get from that? Oh, you know what should have happened? The Samaritan should have looked at the guy in the ditch and just said, you know what, call your local representative in Congress and he's going to be by to help. Man, I wish this government would just build safer roads. No. No, the Samaritan chose to take it on himself. He took on the bills himself. The government never told him to do it. Anything else is a perversion of Christianity and a perversion of the principles of God. You don't need to be a Christian to believe this. We're talking about what our founders called nature's God and nature's law. You need to understand this because a perversion of God is extraordinarily dangerous. Tonight, I'm going to do what no one in television is dumb enough to do. I'm going to take it a step further and count on my fellow Americans to listen as reasonable human beings. We're living in dangerous times. And unless we understand what people are saying and why they are saying it, how they arrived at those words, then too many Americans are going to be fooled. So here we go. In last week on this program, I showed seemingly intelligent people saying outrageous things about killing cracker babies. You got to kill a cracker baby because they're going to become an oppressor. Well, did anybody stop and think, how do you arrive at that? How does that come out of your mouth and you don't find it abhorrent? Nobody is born a monster. You are carefully trained. Tonight I'm going to show you. We're going to start with James Cone. He is one of the founding fathers of liberation theology. Now, I brought in Anthony Bradley. He is an associate professor of theology and ethics at King's College. He's the author of Liberating Black Theology. He is an expert on this. Anthony, I appreciate all your hard work today. Anthony has been working with the staff all day, and we have been doing our due diligence on this. Thank you very much. I'll come back to you in a minute, Anthony. I just wanted to introduce you to Anthony because I want you to know that I'm not just speaking out of the seat of my pants on this. I understand. I understand the gravity of what we're going to talk about. Black liberation theology started in the 1960s. It's actually just liberation theology. Started in Latin America. It is a brand of Christianity based on the liberation of the oppressed from unjust economic, political, or social conditions. Got it? Liberation theology. It centers around the idea that people are either in one camp or another. There's only two: the oppressor and the oppressed. Poverty, according to theology, this liberation theology, is because the poor are only poor because they are victims of the oppressor. James Cone is credited with starting liberation theology, and the same liberation theology that is behind Reverend Wright's church.
Any group that has institutional power, they are violent. Therefore, the mainline denominations in this country have been violent against black people. The crucifixion of Jesus was a first century lynching. America has a tradition of lynching, in which America lynched more than 5,000 black people in this land. The Christian church said very little about it. It was very violent lynching. So if we understand the cross correctly, we will see it as Jesus being a victim of lynching, a victim of violence. So at the heart of the Christian faith is God taking upon God's self the suffering of the victim. When you see a lynched black body, that's who God is.
There's a lot there. This is kind of complex because Jesus did identify with the victims, but Jesus was not a victim. He was a conqueror. The death of Jesus Christ is a moment of victory, as is the resurrection. See, this is the main difference here. Victims as opposed to messiahs, conquerors. Victims or conquerors. Jesus conquered death. He wasn't victimized. He chose to give his life. He did have a choice. If he was a victim, and this theology was true, then Jesus would have come back from the dead and made the Jews pay for what they did. That's an abomination. This is straight now from Cone. Quote, "Black theology refuses to accept a God who is not identified totally with the goals of the black community. If God is not for us and against white people, then he is a murderer. and we had better kill him. The task of black theology is to kill gods who do not belong to the black community. Okay, it gets worse from here. So how does a white person get salvation in that system, according to Cone?
If the powerful in our society, the white people, if they want to become Christians, they have to give up that power and become identified with the powerless if you're going to be a Christian. You can't be identified with the powerful and also a Christian at the same time. The only way in which your repentance, your forgiveness can be authentic, your reception of it can be authentic, your repentance can be authentic, is that you give back what you took.